Hey everyone, hope you are all well. In this video, we're diving into Azure Data Factory. If you are just starting out or curious about how to build and manage data pipelines in the cloud, you're in the right place. I'll walk you through the basics step by step, so by the end, you'll feel confident to get started. Let's jump in and make data integration easy. Okay, the first question that you might have is what is Azure Data Factory or ADF, and why do you need that? Or in the other word, what's its usage? ADF or Azure Data Factory is Azure's cloud ETL service for serverless data integration and data transformation. As you can see on the slide, ETL stands for extract, transform, and load. In the real scenarios, the use cases that you normally have, you've got a source system and you've got a target system, and you want to move data between them. So the first step is extracting data from the data sources. That might be one data source or more than one. Like you've got data in a CSV file or in a SQL server, etc. Then you want to transform your data. It means you want to just cleanse the data or change its mapping. So the data structure and the schema in the target system might be different with what you have in the source system. So you just make some changes, do some transformation to make data ready for loading that into the destination or target system. And the final step after doing transformation is loading or storing that data into the target system. The target system might be, again, any system that you might have as a sink or target or destination. Uh, it might be a SQL Server table, it might be a blob storage file, etc. Let's elaborate on this with a simple example. Assume that we have this requirement. We have a student's data in CSV format stored in a blob storage, and we want to move this data to a student table in SQL Server. We want to meet this requirement by using ADF. So we create a data pipeline to move this data across. Don't worry about the different part of this diagram at this point. I'll walk you through each part and give you more details about what this stuff is. Uh, the thing that I'd like to explain here, and you need to know about this at this stage, is we've got a source system here. Our source system is a blob storage, and we have our data stored here with the CSV format. We want to just extract data from this data source. We want to transform this data and make it ready for storing into a SQL Server table. And at the end, we just load data or store data into our target system, which is a SQL table. So in ADF terminology, the target or destination system is called sink as well. So this is something that you need to be familiar with. So if you see that in the ADF Studio, you know what that means. Before going forward, I create the ADF resource in the Azure portal. I've created a resource group called ADF Demo Resource Group. I create a resource in that resource group, search for Data Factory here, the marketplace, and choose Create. Give it a name, choose your region, and for version, choose V2. Go to Review and Create. And click Create. Wait for the deployment to be completed. Once complete, just click on Go to Resource and then click on Launch Studio. So it opens up a new tab for you in the browser, and you can see the Azure Data Factory Studio there. Here you go. This is Data Factory Studio. Anything that you want to do in ADF, it gets done here in the studio. We've got different part here. I'll go through this stuff during this video when I create different things and implement different examples. But for now, I want to just start with some of the required tools that we need for creating our first requirement that we discussed earlier. So if we look at the outer area, we see we've got pipelines, data set, data flows, etc. here. And each area is for creating a um, relevant resource there. Also, we've got in manage section linked services and triggers. So I'll explain this stuff first, and then we start working on our requirements. If I go back to our requirement, we know that we have a source blob storage and we have a CSV file on it. The first terminology that we've got in ADF is called linked service. Link service is basically a connection string. It's used for connecting to an external resource. So for example, if you want to connect to a blob storage in this case, or you want to connect to a SQL server, you need a connection string to connect to that. So link service is a terminology of ADF for that connection string. And you need to connect, you need that for connecting to any external resources. Next one is the dataset. Dataset is the schema and structure of the data that you are extracting or you want to load. So for example, in this case, when you extract data from the CSV file, uh, you put it in a data set. The data set represents its schema and structure. And then on the other side of the pipeline, when you want to just load it to the SQL server, again, you put it in a different data set and make it ready for loading to the SQL Server table. Next one is activity. Activity is a task that you want to do on your data. Uh, it might be a copy task. It means that you want to copy data, or it might be delete. It means that you want to delete data. So activity is copy, delete, or things like this. Next bit is dataset again. And as I explained earlier, this dataset is used for loading data and preparing data to be loaded in the SQL server. And this link service is connection string to the SQL server because this side of pipeline is working with the SQL server. So we need a connection string for that. And lastly, here we've got sync or target, which is our SQL Server table. We also have trigger. Trigger means when you create a pipeline, if you want that pipeline to be run in different intervals or you want that to be run event-based, you can create a trigger for that. So for example, you can say, I want this pipeline to be run every 5 minutes, or I want to be in this pipeline to be run every day or something like that. Next one is integration runtime. We need this terminology and we see that in the example that I want to implement. But before implementing that, I just want to quickly explain that here. We have three different integration runtime in ADF. The first one is auto resolve. So if your source and your target in the pipeline both are in Azure Cloud or in our cloud base, the integration runtime would be auto resolve. So it means that it's very straightforward because both resources are on the cloud. The second type is self-hosted. Self-hosted is used when you want to just integrate on-prem data to cloud. So for example, if you've got a on-prem SQL server and you want to just load its data to a blob storage, we need to use self-hosted integration runtime for that. And lastly, SSIS. So if you have SSIS packages and you want to run them in a cloud, you can use this integration runtime. One more thing that is good to know here is the difference between activity and pipeline. So activity, as I said earlier, is a task for copying or deleting or something like that. And pipeline is a tool for creating orchestration in the ADF. So a pipeline basically can contain multiple tasks or multiple activities. So in a pipeline, you can delete data first, then have multiple copy activity, and then at the end, load data somewhere else. So when you want to orchestrate different activities, you can create a pipeline. But if your job or your requirement is only a simple copy or a simple delete, you can just use activity. Let's get back to our requirement and start implementing that. Okay, what I'm gonna do is I start with the simplest solution for this. So I create a copy activity only first to move data across from blob storage to SQL Server. Then in second step, we create a pipeline for that. As I said, pipeline can include and contain multiple activities. So in this case, we can meet this requirement with one simple copy activity. Okay, we'll start with setting up our data source. I create a student CSV file on my local machine. So open up a notepad window and just paste this in the notepad file. So I want to have three different columns: first name, last name, and age. And I've got three records in that file. So I save it somewhere on my local machine and name it students.csv. And I just save it. Now go to Azure portal and in our resource group, and we create a storage account. Search for storage account and click create. Give it a name, choose your region, and use LRS. Go to review and create, and click on create. When deployment's complete, go to resource, go to a storage browser, blob container, add a container there, give it a name, create, go to the container, add directory, give it a name, click OK, click on upload, and we upload our CSV file here. I select the student CSV from my local computer that we created earlier and click on open and then upload. Successfully uploaded. Now our source of data is set up and ready. We need to create our target as well, which is a SQL Server. Now we set up our data pipeline target. In the requirement, our data sync is a SQL Server. So I want to create a SQL Server, but I just created a different resource group for that. You don't need to create a different resource group. You can use the same resource group for all resources. Resource group is basically for grouping your resources in a different logical way. So it's up to you if you want to have a different one or if you want to put all resources in one resource group. So we create wherever we want to create that and search for Azure SQL. Click on create. From SQL database section, choose single database and click on create. Microsoft has a free offer for SQL database. So if you haven't used that before, you can just use it now. I'm going to just apply this offer for myself here. It allows you to have one free database per subscription, and it's obviously limited, but it works for our tutorial. So click apply offer, and then you need to give a name to your database. Then click on create new to create a SQL server for that. So you need a name for that, and you need to pick up a location for that. Our location is Australia East. For authentication method, use both SQL and Microsoft Entra authentication. So it means the way that you want to connect to your SQL server is using SQL Server credentials. It means a username and password that's created in the SQL Server. And also you can use Microsoft Active Directory or Microsoft Entra username and password to connect to this database. So click on set admin and set a Microsoft Entra admin for that. So you can search for your user, and for the server admin login, you just need to give it a name like test login or whatever, and put in a password uh, in the password field and click OK. Once it's done, you see that the created server is uh, populated in this drop-down list, and if your free offer is applied properly, you should see the cost is 0 for this SQL Server database. Next, we need to make sure that behavior when free offer limit reached is selected auto pause. So it means when the offer credit is finished, it's going to just pause the database and it's not going to work until next month. You get more credit. You can go with the second option, which is continue using the database for the additional charge. So it means that when your free credit is over, it starts charging you for the database transactions. But obviously for this tutorial, we want to go with the first option. Just bear in mind that if you choose the second option, you can't change it back to the auto pause later. So yeah, this is something that you need to be aware of that. And for the backup storage redundancy, locally redundant backup storage is selected, which is more than enough for this tutorial. So it means the backup is on the same data center that your server is. So if you've got sensitive data for production environment, you need to use other type of storage backup, which is a zone redundant or geo redundant. But for this case, we use locally redundant one. And that's the only available options for the free offer. Click on review and create. As you can see, the zero cost is applied, and just click on create here. Deployment gets started for that. Takes few seconds. Here you go. The deployment is complete. Now we can just go to the resource. If you look at your resource group, you see that two different resources been provisioned. One is the SQL database, another one is SQL Server. So there are few more configurations that we need to do here before moving forward. Click on your SQL Server and then go to the settings, and in sorry, I think it's in security in networking. Uh, for this tutorial, we want to use selected network option for the network access. So in real scenarios and for production versions, probably you want to use the private endpoint and create firewalls and use the uh, SQL database inside a secure network. But here we just give access to the resources that are coming from the Azure to this database. So it means if there is another service on the another subscription that wants to connect to this database, it's allowed, which is not great, but for tutorial purposes, it's fine. So we choose selected networks and we can just add my local IP address, which is my current local machine IP address to this list as well to make sure that I can connect to this from my local machine. And you need to make sure that tick this checkbox. As I said, it allows Azure services to connect to this server. So if you don't tick this checkbox, ADF cannot connect to this database. And once it's done, you just click on save. Okay, we go back to our resource group. This time we go to the database, go to query editor. You need to put in your SQL Server authentication credentials that we created earlier here, or you can just continue with the Entra user that you set that as a SQL database admin. So I continue with the Entra user. Query editor window comes up. So if you go to the table section, you see that it's empty at the moment. So I write a query here for creating the students table. So we want to have a students table. It's got 4 columns. The first column is the identity column, which is auto number. It starts from 1 and goes up. Uh, it gets populated automatically by SQL Server Engine. And then we have first name and last name, which are varchar columns. And finally, we've got the age column, which is an integer. And we create an index on the ID column to make sure that it's fast enough for querying, and it's our primary key. Okay, I'm going to just run this query and see what happens. So query succeeded. And if we just refresh here, you see that the students table is created. And if you use select top 1000 from the student table and run that, you see that at the moment it's an empty table. Okay, that's pretty much it with the data sync or our data target. We go to the next step to implement the rest of the pipeline for our requirements. Let's have a quick look at the diagram that we saw earlier. Uh, we set up our blob storage and CSV file, which was our data source. Also, we set up our SQL server and our table in the target. Now we go to ADF to create our data integration. The simplest way is creating a copy activity using copy data tool because we don't have multiple activities. It's only one simple copy from source to destination. We start with that one. Pipeline is for orchestration and doing multiple tasks. So we do pipeline later, but for now we go with copy data tool. Go to the data factory that we created earlier and launch Stadio. And in the home screen, click on ingest. In this screen, select built-in copy task. Metadata-driven copy task is for the scenario that you want to pass a parameter to your data pipeline. For example, if you want to pass student ID to the pipeline and then load all students greater with ID greater than that parameter, you can use this option. But for our scenario, the built-in copy task is enough. Task cadence or task schedule, we just want to run it once at the moment, but you can schedule it for different time interval. Click on next. In source data store screen, from source type, choose Azure Blob Storage and then click on new connection. In new connection page, select account key for authentication type. You can just use Azure Key Vault and put the connection string into the Azure Key Vault and refer to that here, or you can just directly choose your connection string here. So you need to just select your subscription here, and then we select the storage account that we created earlier, and uh, at the end, you can just test your connection by clicking this button. Connection successful. Just click on create and it creates a linked service for you to that specific storage account. Then in file or folder, click on browse and you go to the container and your directory and you select the CSV file that we created earlier. There are more options here that we don't need them, so we click on next. Next step is determining what is your source file format. So as you can see, based on the CSV file that we passed to the copy data tool, these fields are auto-populated. So the file format is delimited text, and the column delimiter is pipe. So we just accept those stuff. And first row is a header in our CSV file, so we just tick this checkbox. You can just click on preview data to see if your data is loaded properly. As you can see, we've got data loaded here. Everything looks good. So we click on next. Next step is selecting your destination. Destination type is Azure SQL database. And we click on new connection. Choose your subscription. Then in the drop down, you see your database server, and then you can pick up your created database. And lastly, authentication type, use SQL authentication and put in your username and password in the password field. And then click on test connection to see if your connection to the SQL Server database is successful. You see that connection is successful. If you are using the free database, because the free SQL Server database goes to a sleep mode when it's not used, the first time you may get failure. So just try again and you see the connection successful message there. So we click on create. The destination screen is refreshed. You see that the source is our students CSV file, and it goes to dbo.students table. Click next. In next screen, you do your column mapping. So for the ID column in the SQL Server, we don't need any mapping. Other columns populated properly. First name goes to first name, last name to last name, and age to age. Also, there is a section here if you want a script to be run as a pre-step before running this copy data tool task. Uh, you can just write your script here. For example, if you want to empty the table every time that you run this task, you can write delete from dbo.student here, and every time that you run this, it deletes the table rows first and then imports data. But for now, we just leave it as is and we click on next. In settings, give your pipeline a meaningful name. So I name it copy from blob to SQL. You can have a description for that as well. And we click next. The last screen is reviewing everything that we've done so far. You can just click on next here. Deployment complete. You can click on finish now. It goes back to the Data Factory Studio. We go to the left pane. And if you go to the monitor section, you see that pipeline name here. And you see the details about the run that's happened a few seconds ago. And it was a successful run. If you click on the pipeline name, it goes to the details for this pipeline. And if there is any error, you want to check the error message, you can come to this screen and have a look at that. If you click here, also you see more details about what has happened in this run. Okay. Okay, now we verify that data has been inserted to the SQL table. If we go back to the query window, run this query, you see that the table's got these rows. The three records that we had in our CSV file are now in the students table, and the ID columns been populated as an auto number. Alrighty, we met the requirement using copy data tool. Next, we use copy activity in pipeline to implement the same requirement. Before creating our second pipeline using copy activity in pipeline, we need to delete all the rows from the students table. So I go to the SQL database that we created in the query window and run this command, delete from students. Query succeeded, affected rows 3, so the 3 rows deleted. And just to make sure nothing's in the table, just run a select command, and you see that there is no rows in this table anymore. Now go back to ADF Studio and click on Orchestrate in the home screen. In the right pane, give our pipeline a name, and then just click on this properties button at the top right corner to just hide it, and we have better view here. Next step, if you look at this activities pane here, we've got different sections. We expand, move, and transform, and we drag and drop the copy data activity into our designer surface. We give our activity a name, and then we go to source. In the source, I want to use the same data set that I created in the previous example. So we can see that here, source data set. But if you want to create a new one, that's fine. You can click on new button. You want to read data from Azure Blob Storage. So you click on Azure Blob Storage, click continue. Your data format is CSV. So you click on delimited text CSV, continue. Give your data set a name and make sure that you tick this checkbox. In the linked service, You can create a new link service by clicking new, and it's the same screen that we went through that in the previous example. So I don't want to repeat these steps, but if you want to create a new one, feel free to click a new one. For now, I just discard these changes, and here I go with source data set that I created earlier. Make sure that file path in the data set is selected here. It means that the file that we select in the data set, we want that file path to be used for reading the source file, and make sure that recursively checkbox is ticked. This is for reading multiple file if you've got multiple file in the same directory. So it recursively reads all the file there. So we're done with the source. We go to the sink. For sink, I want to use the same data set that I created earlier as well. But if you want to create a new one, you can just click on new. And from here, because your sink is Azure SQL database, so choose this one, click continue, give it a name, and you can create a link service for that. For creating the link service to Azure SQL database, again, it's the same screen that we talked about it earlier. So I just cancel this and discard changes. I come back to this screen. I select the destination data set that we created earlier. Here, right behavior should be insert. It means that we want to just insert rows into the table. You can choose upsert. Upsert means update or insert. So it matches the records in from the source with the destination. And if it can match those records using the key columns that you introduce here, it just update those values. Otherwise, it just inserts that as a new record. So, for example, if you say you've got an ID in your file, and you can just add that as a key column, and it just matches up that ID from the source with the destination record. If that ID is found, all the values for that records updated with the source data. If it's not found in the destination table in our SQL table, it just creates a new record there. And table option, we use the existing table. And if you want to have a pre-copy script, you can just add that here. That's pretty much here with the sink. We go to the mapping. In the mapping, you can click on import schemas and wait for the screen to bring up the fields that we've got in the source and destination. Uh, as we said earlier, ID column is a auto number, and its value is generated on the SQL side, so we don't need a mapping for that. Everything else, you can just make sure that your mapping is correct, or if you want to delete, or if you want to add a new one, or if you want to change them, you can just drag and drop them and uh, sort it out based on your requirement. This is our mapping. In settings and user properties, we don't need to change anything. We just accept the default values. And finally, we validate our pipeline by clicking this validate button at the top left corner. So I click on that. It says the offset require a key column to be specified. Please specify one or more column for row matching in this task. So if you come back here, we forgot to choose insert. So we select insert here. If you select offset, as I said, you need to introduce a key here. We do that again. Your pipeline has been validated, no error. I close this window, and you can also debug your pipeline here as well by clicking this debug button. So if I click that debug button, you see that the output window comes up here, and you can just trace your pipeline status. So the pipeline status is in progress at the moment, and your activity is queued. So we wait for that to be completed, and it succeeded. To validate the pipeline result, we go back to the query window and run our select statement. You see that those rows are there, but this time the idea started from 4, because every time that you delete rows from there, it doesn't get restarted. So if you want to restart the ID auto number column, you need to use a SQL command, that we don't need it here. Anyway, if we go back here, when you are happy with your pipeline result, it's validated, there is no error. From the top toolbar, you can click on Publish All, and it gets published. And before doing that, as you see in this way, you've got more control on your pipeline activities. You can have multiple activities here. You can add more stuff to your designer, and in each step, refer to the previous step result, and do different thing if you want to massage your data, and do data transformation and things like that. And then at the end, load it to your sink. But for now, I just click on the Publish All and click on Publish. It's publishing complete, as you can see. And now if we go back to Home and go to Monitor, go to the pipeline run, here you've got 2 different tabs. One is for triggered, one is for debug. On the triggered tab, you see all the pipelines that have been triggered. And in the debug tab, you see the list of pipelines that you've run that in a debug mode. So the second pipeline that we created, we ran that in the debug mode. So it comes up here. And make sure that you are choosing the correct time frame when you are doing the query here, or you are filtering your pipeline run here. Okay, that's it here. There's only one more thing that I'd like to show you here. So if you go back to Home and go back to Author, in the second pipeline that we created, if we want to just run the pipeline in different schedules, we can just add a trigger to that. So for example, if you want this pipeline to be run every minute, we can just add a trigger and say new or edit. If you click on trigger now, it just runs the pipeline once uh, uh, for now, but we want to just create a schedule for that. So we come here. From here, there is a drop down for creating your trigger. The type should be schedule. You specify the start date, your time zone, and you say that every minute, for example. Run this pipeline. You can just specify an end date for this schedule, and you just click on OK, and click on OK, and then click Publish All. In this screen, the list of changes that we've made comes up. So if you want to just go through them and review them and make sure that nothing's unexpected getting published, you can just check that out here in this window. But if you are happy with the change, currently we just added a trigger. We are happy with that, so we go with publish. Publishing completed. And if I go back to monitor and wait here in triggered, it should come up every minute here in the list. Here you go. It comes up here and triggered by the previous one that was the first pipeline that we created. The trigger type was manual trigger because we triggered that manually, but this one is based on the trigger that we created. So maybe it's better to give it a meaningful name when you are creating the trigger. And if I refresh, you see that it succeeded. And it's going to happen every 1 minute. So if I go back to the query window and run that, you see that the same rows added to the table again. We go back here and we wait for next minute. So I pause the recording for a bit. And now the pipeline triggered again. It's in progress. Takes few seconds. It succeeded. If you look at the time here, so this run is at 6:50 local time. This one is 6:49. So it's getting run every 1 minute. So if we go back again here, run the query, you see that you have 3 more records here in the table. All right, that's pretty much this with the copy activity. Please bear with me. In next part, discuss a new requirement, and I'll implement that requirement as well. Here is our new requirement. We have a student's data stored in an on-prem SQL Server database, and we want to move this data to a blob storage with CSV format. As you can see in the diagram, we've got on-prem environment here, which is like your company's internal network. I use my local machine for that. And we've got a SQL server in the on-prem network, and there is a database there with a students table and records. We want to move this data to cloud environment and to a blob storage, and we want to store those data in CSV format. The first step is setting up the on-prem environment. So I start with that, then I'll explain more about the steps that we need to do in ADF site. On my local machine, I open the SQL Server Management Studio and right-click on Databases, choose New Database, and create a new database for this demo. Give it a name and click OK. Your database gets created. Highlight your database, click New Query. I use the same script that I used before for creating the students table here. So if I click on Execute, it's an empty table here. So we need to add some records to this table. If now we just select data from that table, see that we've got 3 records in this table. Our data source is set up now. We go to Azure portal to set up our blob storage as well. I just use the same storage account that I created earlier. So just click on your storage. Go to a storage browser. In blob container, we just create a new container. And I'm going to call it my target. Click on create. In your container, add a directory. I call it CSV. Okay. Now it's ready. And last step is setting up the ADF for moving data across from the on-prem SQL database to the blob storage. So we go to Azure portal. This is where the integration runtime comes in. When we are setting up our pipeline, we need to use self-hosted as an integration runtime. We went through that earlier when I was talking about the ADF basics. So this is where we use this integration runtime for accessing on-prem databases. Okay, let's go to the Azure portal and create a pipeline for that. In ADF Studio, we click on Ingest. We choose Built-in Copy Task and Run Once Now. Click on Next. This is our source data store. So it's SQL Server. So we choose SQL Server here. Make sure you don't choose Azure SQL Server because that's the online database. For connection, we create a new connection to our on-prem database. First of all, we give that link service a name, and this is where the integration runtime needs to be created. So we click on the drop-down, click on New, and you see that we've got different integration runtime here. Azure, as we spoke about it earlier, is for cloud-to-cloud connection. The self-hosted is for creating connection to on-prem resources and private networks. And if you already created a self-hosted integration runtime, you can just reuse that. It comes up here in the bottom of this screen. But for now, this is our first time. So we choose this one and click on continue. We give it a name and click create. Next step is we need to install the integration runtime on a machine that uh, we have our on-prem database. There are two options for that. The first option is clicking just this link. It does everything automatically for you. The second option is just manually download the integration runtime, install it, and then register it with the provided key here. So we click on the first option. It's the easier one. We let it to be downloaded, and then we click on that. It starts installing the integration runtime, and you can see that what is happening here. It's downloading the required file, and it's going to install that. So pause the recording, and once it's nearly completed, I just resume from there. Alrighty, I've got four green ticks here. The installation is complete. It took nearly 15 minutes for me, uh, um, but depending on your internet connection speed, it might be shorter or longer for you. Just be patient until it gets installed on your machine. All right, so just click close once it's installed and close on this screen. We go back to previous screen for creating a link service. So now we choose this integration runtime. You need to just refresh that, and you see that it gets green. We need to provide our on-prem server name here. So it comes from SSMS. If we go back to SSMS on my local machine, this is localhost / MS SQL Server 02. So I just put that in here. Our database name is ZapDemo. We need a username and password for connecting to this database. So I go back to the SQL server on my local, go to security, highlight logins, right click and choose new login, give it a name and choose SQL Server Authentication. I put in a password here and you need to put in the password in the confirm password as well. Uh, we just untick user must change password at next login and untick this one as well. So ensure it's not going to get expired. And that's it. Uh, Here in this dropdown, we choose the database that we created, was a demo, and we click on OK after putting in the password. The login created now. We go back to ADF and use same credential that we created here. Put username and password in and can just test your connection using test connection button. Okay, the connection failed for some reason. We check the error message here. So I cannot connect to the database for this user. I think I know what that problem is. If we go back to SSMS, go to security and login. This is the user that we created. So if I double click on that, and if I go to server roles, we need to tick the sysadmin role for this user and then click on OK. We go back to ADF again and test connection again. Connection failed again. We check the error message, see what is happening. So if you see at the end of the error message is complaining about the SSL provider and the certificate chain issue. So this is because I've upgraded my OLEDB driver for SQL Server on my machine. So to fix this problem, I can just upgrade OLEDB driver on my machine and fix it from there. Or you can just change your encrypt selection here and change it from mandatory to optional. It fixes your problem. So if we put the encrypt on optional and test connection again, you see this time connection is successful. We click on create to create this link service for our data source. It's created and now you can see the list of tables here. So I just select the students table here and then we click on next. You can preview your source data here. So I click on preview data. As you can see, the data is coming from this link service, which is the on-prem one, and we see our local database table data here. Click on next. This is for setting up our destinations. Obviously, our destination is a blob storage. Let's select blob storage. And I'm going to just create a new connection this time for that. So give it a name. And we choose our subscription here. And then our storage account name. And then test connection. Make sure everything's fine. Click on create. It gets created. So for the folder path, click on Browse. This time we go to My Target and click OK. And for the file name, we can just give it a file name. So we call it student.csv. Click Next. This is the file format that we want to have on the destination. We just accept the default and click Next. Give our pipeline a name, click Next. And in last page, we can review our settings, click Next. Wait for the validation. Validation was successful and pipeline was run. So click on Finish. We go to Author. Under the pipeline, now we've got that new pipeline here. If we go to Monitor, we see that there is a new run for copy from on-prem SQL to Azure Blob. And if we go to our storage account, our Blob storage, we should see the CSV file is there. Go to a storage browser, container, my target. And here you go, you see that student CSV. Seems that I had a typo in it, but anyway. And you see that the file is created. You can just download and open a file to see the content. Click on that. And this is its content, the content of the CSV file. So we've got 2 records here. Excellent. We managed to meet our requirement using ADF. We read data from on-prem database. We used ADF and we just stored that data in a blob storage with CSV format. So the point here was using different integration runtime, which was called self-hosted. We're done with this part. You can do the same requirement as an exercise using, if I go back to ADF, using copy activity in pipeline. So by clicking this orchestrate and try to do the same thing. Okie dokie. If we can get enough attention and views for this tutorial, I'll continue it with more interesting topics like copying data incrementally or data flows and a lot of more useful contents. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video if you found it valuable, and write your comments for us. It would help us to continue creating more contents for you. Thanks a lot and bye for now.